Was the calm before the storm. While the favourites rested in the main field, the Danish friends of Soren Lilholt and Jesper Skibby fought out the finish on Humberside. Lilholt, sprinting with his nose on his tyre, proved the stronger. But it's this weekend that will provide the final winner as we face the last 2 days in the hills of the north of England. Race leader Michel Dernies of Belgium and our own Robert Miller from Scotland are still equal on time, with no indication yet as to who is the best. Hello again and welcome to the final weekend of the Kelloggs Tour of Britain, and it's not just the riders this morning who are relieved to feel this easterly wind coming in off the North Sea here in Bridlington. You know, this race is so finely balanced, isn't it? Michel Dernies locked in the same time as Robert Miller, and while these two riders are having their personal battle, we mustn't forget the challenge that could come this weekend from other riders. In third place overall at the moment is Maurizio Fondriest of Italy. He's 1 minute 43 seconds back, but every day this week he's never had a worse finish on any stage than 4th place. There's also the Spanish climber Federico Echeverri. He will really enjoy this weekend on the North Yorkshire moors and tomorrow in the Pennines. And of course there is Steven Roche. He lost time on the road to Sheffield, but he still hasn't lost all hope of winning this race. Here he is now talking with Paul Sherwin.
In the next 2 days, Robert Miller and Michel Dernies will be watching each other very closely, but it still could give you a chance to jump away and take the glory.
Theoretically speaking, it could work out like that, but unfortunately my legs just haven't come right here. Like, I finished the Tour de France very tired because of the heat. There's 22 stages in the Tour de France and I feel like now I'm on my 27th stage. But like, maybe with the change in the weather, maybe it's a little bit cooler, maybe I will feel a little better. But Michel Dernies and Robert Miller are going very, very strong at the moment. They're following each other everywhere, but they're two very good teams also, so it's very difficult for anybody to get away.
Well, this is the overall situation this morning. Dernies and Miller equal on time. Fondriest 1 minute 43 back. Echeverri 1 minute 59. And this is the course they face, with the sting coming in the middle in the North Yorkshire moors over Rosedale and Westerdale, before life gets a little bit sweeter as we roll out through Durham into Newcastle. And here's Steven Roche of the Belgian Histor team chatting with the Belgian Michel Dernies, who's on the rival team from Belgium, the Wyman squad.
Well, they're probably trying to find out what the climb's like today, because most of the foreign riders are very worried about the climbs on today's stage and also that stage of tomorrow.
And a little bit of nervous reaction this morning because the average speed only 18.8 miles an hour in the first 17 miles. So the riders very tense with the North Yorkshire moors, too many of them. Just one big secret, and look at this. This looks like John Baldy again. He's enjoying his stay in Britain, Paul, isn't he?
But he doesn't seem to be too nervous at the moment. He makes acquaintance with a nice young English girl.
Didn't stay around long enough to get a telephone number though, and he's going to have to catch up with the race now. Well, there are times when you can do that, and there are times when you can't. And as we approach Pickering, now I would suggest it's one of the times when you don't stop off at the back of the field, because the race is now beginning to look a little bit angry here. This is the TV time sprint in Pickering, and big Dave Mann is taking on Roscioli again, and it looked to me as though Dave Mann just stole that one ahead of Roscioli, with McMurdo taking third place from the Air Marshal Kirk team. So Dave Mann is building himself an unassailable lead in that competition, and here is Jimmy Savile, who often welcomes the race when it comes through Yorkshire. And we're, in fact, we're climbing out of town here. Alan Rushton, the race organiser, and that's in case Jimmy gets lost. But believe me, he knows the North Yorkshire moors as well as any cyclist. Heading up then towards Rosedale. And this is the first attack. This is Frederick Vichot, who's broken clear, Paul. So the first man to go out on the attack.
Well, Vichot would like to get away if he can, because we all know his reputation. If Vichot can get to the top of this climb, there aren't very many riders in the world who could stay with him on the descent, but he's not got much of a lead at the moment, 10 or 15 seconds.
Well, there's the main field, coming along behind the lone figure of Frederick Vichot. who has raced in England on a number of occasions before. And the Swiss rider setting the pace up the climb, but they're coming up very, very quickly towards him now. And this is the Z team who are clawing him back. Robert Miller tucked in nicely in second place, and not surprisingly, Paul, Michel Derni's right alongside Miller there.
Michel Derni's is going to keep an eye on Robert Miller all the time today. It's good to notice that Miguel Arroyo, the Mexican on the front there from the Z team, is trying to help Robert Miller. He could be a big ally for Robert in the hilly stages as we get towards the finish.
You get some idea of the gradient here from our helicopter as the riders tackle this climb of Rosedale. It is a very, very difficult climb indeed. It climbs away from the village of Rosedale, which nestles deep in the heart of the North Yorkshire moors behind Pickering. And let's have a look at the front. Brian Holm, the champion of Denmark, and also again the yellow jersey of Derni's. Now Derni's is marking every move, Paul, and he's not relinquishing the front place of the bunch.
He's staying in contention all the time here. This is the best way to ride these climbs at the moment, but not only because the climb here is very difficult, but when you get to the top of the climb, it's very open and very windy, so you've got to start in the front when they start to form those echelons in the wind at the top of this climb. Miller just tucked in behind Derni's as well.
Sprinkling of the spectators here as we go over one of the cattle grids, and that main field is thinning out under the pressure at the front. But it's interesting to see, Paul, that I think it's Patrick Robeet who's setting the pace here for Derni's.
Well, his teammate Patrick Robeet is a very good climber, rode very well in the Tour de France this year, just moving up on the outside of Brian Holm's shoulder. There is Robert Miller, but there Michel Derni's very close in contention. In fact, he's taking the wheel of Robert Miller here.
Well, Miller's going for the points on the top because that white jersey indicates Miller leads in the King of the Mountains competition. The points are scored for the first 10 riders over the summit, and Miller is going for the top in first place here. Derni's gets second, and this must be knocking the confidence of Miller to find that Derni's is mastering him on the climbs.
Well, it won't be very good for his morale at all. But here we get confirmation of the King of the Mountains there. There's Robert Miller in first place with 10 points, Michel Derni's second, and Patrick Robeet in third place.
So back up to the leading group. And Miller having a look over the rider in front of him to see where he's going. Oops-a-daisy, and there's the problem. The sheep have come onto the road. And the field more or less together, Paul, for considering that was quite a steep climb. There's a big bunch come over the top here. Let's have a look at the back of the race. This is a little glance at the back with the stragglers who have been blown away on the climb of Rosedale. 4 riders a long way behind the peloton. And there's a little group here of some 7 men working furiously to get back. That is not the main field. I think that might be, or is it, Paul? Because we're going on to the front here. Look at this. So, in fact, the field is split into 3 distinct groups with a lot of chasers.
It's split very much so, but I think more so over the top of the climb than actually on the climb itself. Here, over the moors where it's very, very windy, the pressure is on as we're going up across the top of the moors to try and get to the front group. And I think we've just managed to catch them up now.
Well, this is the narrow little drop down into the famous ford in Westerdale, and then the riders climb away up over the top, over the moors of Little Hogra, and here is the water splash. And understandably this year, not too much water in it. Previously, I've seen riders go through there in water up to 7 inches deep. So the crowd that had gathered there, hoping for the inevitable prang, were disappointed today as the field now climbs away up the long slog. And this really is Robert Miller's final chance, Paul, before we level out for Newcastle.
Well, Miller will have to try and go here, but you see there straight away Michel Derni's is marking him all the time. Robert's going to have to try and get rid of Michel Derni's man for man on one of these climbs, because Michel Derni's has just got one rider to watch, and that's the one in front of him.
Let's have a look down. This is the drop into the ford here of the group behind that leading group. It must be very, very unnerving to go through that water, because in fact the cobblestones underneath are very, very slimy indeed. Oh, and there's somebody gone down as I spoke. So somebody's fallen off on the slime at the bottom. It looks like one of the Stellar Italian team. It's the Eurocar team has gone down, Andrea Taffi. So a rider who's won a stage in this race now sitting on the floor there.
Well, a few days ago the riders were looking for water, but I don't think Andrea Taffi would be very pleased with the shower that he took there.
Absolutely, and unfortunately he has to start climbing the long climb straight away. Let's go back up to the leaders then. Robert Miller again setting the pace, but he's not shaking Derni's. as Dernice snatches a sponge there off a young man wearing the team colours of Robert Miller. How about that?
Well, that's one for the books. Here we've still got Miller on the front, and Dernice all the time marking him, keeping an eye on what he's doing.
I must say that's been very noticeable this week around Britain that since Greg LeMond won the Tour de France for the Z team and Robert Miller has been such a great challenger in this week's Kelloggs Tour of Britain, all the youngsters watching the race seem to have been wearing the Z team jerseys. This is the sprint for the top of Westerdale. Miller loses out this time to Coccioli of Italy, and Miller gets second place. Dernice is third. He's sticking to Miller's back wheel like glue. Steven Roche gets a good fourth, and Echeverry is fifth. So some great names there, but they're all having to work out what they're going to do with Michel Dernice. And so the Z there on the road, indicating that Robert Miller is in charge, but in fact only in the King of the Mountains, Paul. He keeps his lead, obviously, in that competition now. And the final day still to come. Attack here by Steven Roche.
Soon to be joined there by David Rayner from the Banana Falcon team, the rider in yellow there with the yellow stripe down the middle of his crash hat.
So Roche is bringing the race away from the North Yorkshire moors now, as we're about 12 miles outside Middlesbrough. And then just a few ups and downs as we head on through the county of Durham itself, and then on into Newcastle. Roche trying to get clear here because there might be a chance, Paul. Everybody's been tensed up for the hills. They're coming away from the hills, and it might be he could break away. He's Dernice. There's still plenty of fight in this rider, Paul. Well,
he's fighting all the time. Michel Dernice seems to be chasing everything that moves on the road at the moment. And here's Frankie Art d'Arbula coming through to give him a little hand. Steven Roche at the front here, still piling on the pressure with Dave Rayner. Maybe they can get the gap that they need and hope that the riders won't chase behind.
Well, Dave Rayner, who is an excellent rider, great climber as well. He's managed to get away from the front. They're 13 seconds ahead of the chase group. The big field behind, as far as we can understand, is around 35 riders strong at the minute. And this is the chasing group. And again, it's Miguel Arroyo, who's doing a lot of work for his teammate Robert Miller here to try and close this group down. They'll be worried about Roche.
They will be very worried because Steven Roche, if he's given that much of a lead, couldn't get away. He could get away and build up a lead of 2 or 3 minutes, but it looks as if they're coming back together there because we've got one of the riders from the Z team on the front there chasing it down. That may well be Miguel Arroyo, who's trying to bring it back together with a little bit of help from the Wyman team as well. And Roche has decided that that's enough. He's sat up and he's starting to have something to eat for later on in the day.
So the attack is tried and it's failed. Patrick Robit brings the race back together again, the faithful teammate of Michel Dernice, who's third in line. And the little man in the middle is Miguel Arroyo. 63 miles covered now. The speed has shot up somewhat, just over 20 miles an hour. But remember, it includes the 2 big climbs now behind them. That's where we are, dropping down to the low spot on the ride today, down to Middlesbrough itself. And then we climb up towards Durham. And the peloton is growing all the time. It's up to about 60 riders by the look of it now. And this is an attack by the Italian rider, Gianluca Bortolami. And I must say, a new name to us all, Paul. The first time I've seen him race.
Well, he raced last year in the World Championships when he finished 5th, and he's ridden quite well this year with 3rd place on a couple of stages in the minor stage races, but he's jumped away, hoping to get away on his own here.
And he's joined by the top 2.
He's a bit surprised, I think, to see the yellow jersey of Michel Dernice and also the 2nd place rider, Robert Miller. They've come up to him.
So we've got 3 leaders, and we'd never have guessed them. A new professional, the yellow jersey, and the man who's following him everywhere, Robert Miller. They're going away from the field now, and we've got just the flat roads to come into Newcastle. So join us right after the break.
Every bike that leaves Halfords is inspected by a trained cycle specialist. Then to see if it needs any slight readjustments, we'll even inspect it again. All you need to do is bring it back.
Great.
Thank Halfords for that. And Carrera Bikes range and fluorescent cycling.
If you want an impartial opinion on who's got the best football team, you don't ask a football team manager. If you want impartial advice on how to vote at the next election, you don't ask a politician. And if you want impartial advice on all the pensions around, you don't ask someone who works for a pension company. You go to NatWest. We've no pensions of our own to offer, just impartial advice on everyone else's. We're the only major high street bank who do this. So, For hard facts and no hard sell, have a natter with NatWest.
The British have always had a certain way of doing things. But Shield contains a deodorant that gives you the confidence to throw off that traditional British reserve and become a little more continental. Shield. For extra confidence, just add water.
Oi, oi, oi! Here you are, Gav. 2 pork pies and a strawberry yoghurt.
Yeah, what about my Cycling Weekly?
Cycling Weekly, Britain's most wanted cycling magazine.
That makes a refreshing change.
Woodpecker, what a refreshing change.
Watch out for the XXX brand. XXX, the extra strong mint from Roundtree's.
New Ariel Rapide Travel Pack. It's never been so easy to get clean away.
Welcome back. A bit of a different finish here in Newcastle today. No circuits at the city centre, just a straight race up Grey Street to cross the line under the famous statue of Earl Grey himself. And as they do so, you'll notice one car in particular in close attendance. Every sport needs its referees.
And in the French-speaking world of cycling, they're called commissaires. 5 in this tour, strategically placed in cars through the field to look out for infringements. There are 2 serious offences. Towing, when a rider hitches a lift from a team car, the penalty can be disqualification. And pacing, or using the slipstream of a car as a pull. That carries an £80 fine and time penalties. Britain's most experienced international commissaire says they have to maintain high standards for the sake of the sport.
I feel that the commissaire has the duty of standing up to be counted, because if he ignores serious breaches of the rule, I think that could lead to a decline in standards and loss of respect, of course.
There have been more than 24 fines on riders and team managers so far in this tour. They've been for offences as diverse as jersey pulling, swearing and unauthorised feeding.
Do you get a lot of dirty business then?
No, I think professional racing's quite good. They're very intent on racing to the finish, and the best man winning. Occasionally people step over the mark, and it's for the commissaires to step in and take action.
It may be a professional sport, but happily cycling doesn't have too many professional fouls.
Commissaires, the men in cycling who need eyes in the back of their heads. Well, they're close to the action today, of course, as always, and so is Phil Liggett. So let's return straight away to him.
Thank you, Chris. We're looking down now on the beautiful Durham Cathedral, and I'm quite sure the chief commissaire on the race today has made a note of 3 riders who are now out in front. They've made their move, 45 miles to go, and I have to say, Paul, the tactic totally mystifies me as to why Robert Miller and Michel Derniz are out in front with an unknown Italian.
Well, it's a very strange reaction. I think what's happened is they've got 1 minute 40 at the moment. They've obviously decided to carry on with the race, but I think what happened was they followed the Italian when he attacked. They found themselves in the lead, so they decided, well, we might as well have a go for it, and we can see now that they're just coming up to the sprint.
And this is the last TV time sprint of the day in Durham, and there are more important things at stake now, because the yellow jersey nor the white jersey of Robert Miller have contested it. Bortolami, the young professional from Italy, takes the 5 points there, and this is the chase behind now. Fabio Roscioli of Del Tongo, and the Del Tongo team, of course, Paul, want this race to come back together.
Well, they obviously wanted to come back together for Maurizio Fondriest, who's been the most consistent finisher in the Tour so far, and it's very surprising that they actually let these 2 riders get away to begin with. But here you see Steven Roche from the Histor team coming through to give them a little bit of a hand as well.
Well, Roche tried to escape earlier on the moors today. They brought him back, and now he's trying to chase down his former teammate, in fact, Robert Miller. and Michel Derni's, and of course the Italian. Here we are back with the leaders, and Miller working very hard here, Paul. And again, if you're in the yellow jersey, what is there to gain now for Derni's here to actually work with Miller?
Well, actually, as we're talking at the moment, Michel Derni's is trying to work out just exactly how far he's got to go. He's checking the little route map that the riders all carry with them, and he's comparing it with his watch to see roughly what time it is and work out how far he's got to go. He seems to be having a little bit of trouble working out exactly where he is. He put it back into his pocket, and then we go back to the main field again. Rossioli's carrying on. He's leading at the front of the chasing group again. Steven Roche very much in attention there, trying to keep the speed up.
I think it was Dominique Arnaud also from Castelron-Morale also sharing in the chase. Of course, we're coming down to the closing miles now, and I think this lead is also coming down. Look at the speed now of the peloton down the dual carriageway as we head towards Gateshead, because this is the big chase. You can't hold the field back, Paul, once they can sense the finish a few miles down the road.
Well, once they get launched into attack, they really do bore down on anybody who's away at the moment. Here's Brian Home. Again, Steven Roche there, 6 miles from the finish, and there's 1 minute lead. So it looks as if they may well stay away in the front, but you never can tell in bicycle racing, because a racing bunch really can pull back on a small group.
So down Bottle Bank here, very sharp descent round the straw bales. Now they will swing right over the low-level bridge, then they will swerve sharp left, and then they'll be lining up, Paul, for Grey Street. And Robert Miller needs just 1 single second to take that yellow jersey.
And it's a hard finish, Grey Street, as well. And both these riders, Robert Miller and Michel Derni's, know the finish from previous Wincantons and previous Kelloggs tours. So it could well be that we could decide the Kelloggs tour on the finish at Grey Street.
Back with the peloton, and Paul Curran's having a dig just outside Newcastle itself, because Newcastle is home to Paul Curran virtually. We've been through Stockton where he lives today. Now the finish line in Newcastle. It could be a good finish for Paul today. And he's caught them at the right moment. There must have been a lull in the chase, because he's got the lead he wants. And he knows the finish, of course, and he knows the severity of that climb up Grey Street.
He knows it extremely well, and it really is good for a rider's morale when you get away in front of a home crowd. Now the leaders are at the bottom of Grey Street. They're starting to play around to find the right position. This is the steepest part of the climb here. Miller straight into the wheel of Michel Derni's, and the Italian Bortolami on the back.
Well, there's Curran still chasing. He's now over the low level. Just one rider from the main field chasing him down behind. Now you can see the gradient here in Grey Street, and remember that Michel Derni's will want to stay as close as possible to Robert Miller, because if the photo finish gives a different time, then it will be applied to the overall classification, and frankly 1 second is all that will be required for Robert Miller to take the yellow jersey. And so just look at the crowd here now enjoying the spectacle. It was just on a year ago when the Wincanton Classic finished here, and that was a win then for the Dutch champion Frans Massem. But look at this, Gianluca Bortolami is having a go, and they've waited too long, Paul. Look at the gap he's taken now, but you see Derni's is getting confidence by the fact that Miller has not found the strength to go. Bortolami gets his first ever stage win as a professional, and Michel Derni's looked to me as though he's pipped Robert Miller right on the line. And just look at the field here, they're all on Paul Curran. So they've all caught Paul Curran right on the climb, and he's been launched like a bolt, Maurizio Fondriest. His worst finish on any stage is 4th. He's going to take another 4th here now. That will give him 3 4th places and 2 3rd places in the 5 stages we've had so far. Joey McLaughlin looked to have brought in the main field.
This is how Bortolami won his first professional stage. He's absolutely thumping that gear on, a much bigger gear than Robert Miller and Michel Derni's. Derni's tried to react but can't.
And this is the result. Bortolami wins his first ever professional race. Michel Derni's 1 second back. Robert Miller would have loved that, because that would have given him the race leader's yellow jersey. There's Dave Mann. He's more or less won the TV Time sprint competition, but it was a hard day for Rob Holden, and his face tells us that story. So the big crowd enjoying the celebrations of a young Italian, 22 years of age. He's now getting the feel for winning professional bike races. Robert Miller, well, all being well, he'll now win the King of the Mountains title tomorrow in Manchester, but this is the jersey he really wants, the yellow one, and quite frankly, he's no closer to it tonight. So the overall situation, Derni's still in the same time as Robert Miller. Maurizio Fondriest remains in 3rd place. Here's Paul Sherwin with Robert.
Do you think this will have taken a lot of force out of you for tomorrow? Because tomorrow is going to be a big day, and that's the day when you're going to try and take the yellow jersey.
I'm sure it has. I don't feel so good now. But I was better this morning. I think maybe after a good night's sleep I'll be okay. Today it wasn't as difficult as like everybody said it was going to be. It was just like a little bit of a suicide move with us all in the wind for the last 40 kilometres, like 3 of us. So that was it's a bit of a dodgy move, but I didn't understand the tactics of the guys in the back. Fondriest seemed like he would have won the sprint anyway here, so I don't know why they let us go.
So do you think that you've still got enough force, because Michel Derni's must have been tired as well today?
Yeah, all 3 of us were tired on the front there. We'll have to wait and see if he recovers or I recover. He's riding okay. He's always following me, so it's a bit difficult for tomorrow.
Tomorrow's another day?
Yeah, tomorrow's Sunday and go home after that.
Well, Michel Derni's will be the moral victor today, even if he didn't win the stage, because he controlled Robert Miller, the climber, over the North Yorkshire moors and then beat him in the end in the sprint. So if this race does come down to points tomorrow night, it'll be Michel Derni's, I think, who'll carry off that final yellow jersey. There's still one more chance for Robert Miller, and he knows it, but time has now run out. Tomorrow he must win this race or finish second to the Flying Belgian. Stay with us tomorrow night, of course. We have our special 1-hour programme beginning at 5:30. Remember, it's our special Sunday night time. But for now, from Newcastle upon Tyne, from Chris, myself and Paul Sherwin, it's goodbye.